We're only 1 week into 2024 now, and we're already seeing Blizzard come out and talk about some of the bigger issues in Season of Discovery, as well as making some nice small changes to the existing Phase 1 content, which I find a little bit strange on the basis that when we look at the roadmap, we don't expect to be in Phase 1 for too much longer. Now, on the basis, because of the new year, it's been a very short week this week, there's not too much to talk about, but there's definitely some big things that are being discussed over on Twitter. Twitter? X? I don't know, whatever it's called. We'll start there. Now, Josh Greenfield, aka Agrand, has been in a lot of conversation talking about pre-made PvP and how it just sucks to solo queue, and how solo queue just isn't even really an option at the moment if you want to get any wins. Now, Husky actually made notes of how many wins, how many losses, the win percentage, and how many pre-mades he actually came against. And if you've done any Warsong Gulch at all, you know as soon as you get in and you see it plagued with hunters and priests, it's probably a pre-made. Agrand's put out 5 points about this. The first one being this is actually a tricky problem with no easy answers. Do you make 2 separate queues? You may scream yes, and maybe it's fine when we only have Warsong Gulch, but when we have all 3 battlegrounds and 2 queues of each, some of these queues may literally never pop. Now, I do agree to a certain extent, but having 2 queues to me does actually make sense, especially if you was only to do it for Warsong Gulch and Arathi Basin. Ulrat Valley will never need it, in my opinion. Yes, you'll still get people doing pre-made AVs, but really that is one you can just jump in solo. But many people in the replies have been saying things like, well, just limit it to 1 party, so you can only queue with 5 people in total rather than 10. Now, I don't know if you remember, but that used to be a thing. You used to only be able to queue your party into a Warsong Gulch, but what did we do? We set up 2 parties. Both party leaders queued at exactly the same time. If your queue pops at exactly the same time, the odds were pretty good that you're going to be in the same battleground. Now, I know that's not an exact science, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but still, there are ways around it. I personally see the best way of this actually working is going to annoy you when I say it. If you want to have 2 separate queues, the best way to handle that would be Horde can actually come against Horde in pre-mades, and Alliance can come against Alliance. Now, they actually enabled this back in TBC Classic, and if I remember rightly, it was actually pretty well received. In TBC Classic, when they done it, it would try and match you against the opposite faction first. If that was unsuccessful, then it would resort to a same faction battleground. I know many of you will be screaming at your monitor at the moment like, no, all this cross-faction rubbish in retail was what's ruined the game, but you would only see it in pre-made versus pre-made, so it's almost just like rated battlegrounds without the rating. Now, if you think this goes against the spirit of Horde versus Alliance and all of that, it's not ranked battlegrounds. These are essentially just friendly battlegrounds. So there's no reason it couldn't be classed as a bit of a skirmish, same faction versus same faction. What this would do is actually alleviate the big issue that Agrand spoke about in the fact that sometimes you won't have a queue physically pop because there's not enough pre-mades of the opposite faction potentially to actually get it started. You've got to remember this would all be just in the effort to make sure when you queue, you're not hanging around for ages just because you're joining as a pre-made, because you will be matched up against other pre-mades only. The thing is, what really constitutes a pre-made? Is it having a full group of 10, or would you come against other groups of players if you've got more than 5 in the party? Because if being classed as a pre-made is having a full raid of 10 people, you know what people are going to do? They're just going to queue with 9. So don't get me wrong, like Agrand said, there's a lot of things to think about. So he also said, is it okay for us to potentially damage or kill pre-made PvP to make it easier to solo? Will it actually be that much better? I'm concerned that pre-mades are the boogeyman here more than the actual problem. I mean, yeah, that's fair. We're going to moan about something, and if you're going in and losing constantly, sometimes you'll go in and lose, and it might not be a pre-made, but you'll be like, oh, I hate coming against pre-mades, but actually, they were just a lot more organised than your team was, and maybe got lucky by getting so many hunters and priests in a group. He also then said the reality is and will remain that some activities in WoW are just better in a group. Not to say we won't make adjustments, we are actively talking about this internally, basically daily, but it's not a simple problem, and it doesn't actually have a simple solution. I am a little bit confused how in one post he's like, it might not be the actual problem, and then in the next post he's like, it's not a simple problem. What is it? His 4th message about this was, we just have to take care because any change we make will be hard/impossible to reverse. In the meantime, I'd encourage anyone struggling to branch out a bit. Pre-made spin up constantly, and there are Discord set up for this very thing on almost every realm. And yes, that's absolutely true, and if you want a better chance at winning these battlegrounds, then getting in a pre-made yourself is obviously the answer. The thing I will say, which might sound a bit negative, is me personally, if I was just sat chilling and watching a bit of Netflix, but I want to just do some PvP at the same time, joining a pre-made is almost out of the question because they're going to expect you on Discord, full focus. That makes me sound bad that I'm not fully focusing in Battlegrounds, but you know what I mean. They'd expect you to be on Discord and taking it super seriously, but maybe you just want to chill, do some PvP, and watch some Netflix or something, you know. So I don't think just joining Premade is the answer, because that then starts to ruin the experience for everybody else. That actually makes it worse. If you want to win, go and join Premade. So now all there's going to be is Premades. So people who don't want to do that literally will just not PvP. So whilst that's good advice, going onto Discord and joining Premades, that is not the answer to the problem. And the last one is, might not be what you want to hear, and that's fair, but it's a viable option. You may find that you have a lot more fun in a group and may make some new friends along the way. So obviously that will be in responses to people that have commented about his last one, where he's saying to join Premades, you know, using Discord. Now, quite honestly, I've looked through so many of these responses and I haven't responded myself, but a lot of people are saying similar things. It's class balance. It's the fact that priests and hunters are so overpowered. Make it so only 5 people can join at a time, which I've already said comes with its own problems. People saying it's an MMO, but then you want to queue solo. I mean, that's just ridiculous. That's like saying you're playing a role-playing game, so you have to roleplay. This one particular comment really sticks out to me, because the queues will always be dead once AV's a thing outside of their weekends. Making them playable beforehand should be a thing before that. And this is actually something that I wanted to say earlier on in the video, but thought it might rub people up the wrong way. But this is phase 1. It's all about Warsong Gulch. We're getting Warsong Gulch rep from Ashenvale. So actually just splitting it while it's the most popular and only battleground to do, I think makes sense, because if they go along the same lines, then, you know, maybe at level 40, it's a Raffi Basin, and we're going to be getting a Raffi Basin rep from like Stranglethorn Val, which is going to be the PvP area, in which case most people are just going to be doing AB, and Warsong Gulch will barely be touched, at which point then whatever. But at the moment, when it's so popular and there's nothing to do really outside of your 20-minute BFD, and then you're going in and doing Warsong Gulch and maybe your Ashenvale event, which lasts about 30 seconds, I think it's important to be encouraging people to go in and know that they're going to have a good time in Warsong Gulch, rather than, if you haven't got a Premade, you cannot win. That's enough about Premades, but that's what the devs have got to say about it. Next up's just a minor one, but you may have noticed that there was a hotfix for Boon of Blackfathom. So the Boon of Blackfathom is no longer affecting pets. What Blizzard have said about this is, we're essentially removing the ability for pets to get the Boon of Blackfathom for now that pets scale with stats. Allowing them to get certain world buffs would effectively let them double dip on these effects and gain far more damage than intended. We'll continue to review this as we move through the content phases and make adjustments to how world buffs interact with pets as needed. So there's 2 things around these sort of changes. One's good, one's bad. The bad thing is, I feel like too little too late. You know, doing it right now is fairly pointless. I would have probably put this change in at the start of phase 2. You know, let people just enjoy the last few weeks, because there's probably not that long left of phase 1. Let people enjoy the last few weeks, you know. But the good thing is the fact that they are making changes, even this close to phase 2. So when phase 2 comes out, and there's going to be a lot wrong, you've got to remember, when we're going from 25 to 40, and at level 40, there is so much content unlocked, you know, in terms of what dungeons you can get into that might be a bit too high for you. We're going to have Gnome Ragon as the raid. There's access to items that reduce armor of targets and things like that, which we're going to find ways of cheesing. There's just a lot more scope for us to do crazy things. So I think the fact that we're seeing changes even this close to the end of phase 1 is a really good sign of what's to come in the future. But if you play a hunter, it's probably been a bit annoying, because you or your pet has been changed on a weekly basis pretty much since launch. Real quick one, and not really a lot to say. We knew about this before Christmas, but Blizzard have added 2 additional spirit healers to be present during the battle for Ashenvale in the northwest of the zone. Now, this does only say during the battle for Ashenvale, so actually they're not going to be there all the time, so you're not going to be able to use them for logout skips, which I love so much and talk about in almost every video. It does just mean, though, if you die up near Zoram Strand, you haven't got a 10-minute run back to where you was fighting the boss. I put a video out solely about this yesterday, but it's actually been posted by Wowhead now, so I just wanted to confirm that it is actually factually accurate, because Warcraft Logs have tweeted it as well. All of the logs with Mechanical Grinch, Spiked Collar and Dog Whistle are going to be invalidated. If we go into the rankings on an individual boss where I know for a fact one of us used a Mechanical Grinch, so let's say WSG here, you can see everybody's log was invalidated, and not everybody was using it, obviously. So if you've got loads of 99s with Mechanical Grinch, say goodbye to them. They've probably gone already, actually. Now, this is a bit of a weird one, and I know there'll be many of you that really just don't care about passing and logs, because you're like, man, it's Blackfathom Deeps. You know, it's phase 1, we're level 25, who cares? There is a lot of people that do care. So now the pets can't get the boon. Should they be invalidated as well? I shouldn't have said that. But it's a fair point. And then the last one is just actually about the logs. And the only reason I really wanted to bring it up is because nothing's really changed. So this is actually just for the entire run, whereas this one is just damage done to bosses. And as I say, this is at the 95th percentile. Now, when we think about all of the changes that priests have gone through, Ellie shamans, balance druids, they're still really struggling to compete with the top dogs. And now it kind of makes sense to have warriors that high on the basis they get a big epic sword. Rogues, we know, are always going to perform well. It's nice to see hunters up there, but again, hunters getting an epic crossbow is going to make a big difference, whereas the casters, the benefit they're going to get from the epic staff is just not as noticeable at this level. I've not got a lot to say about this other than the fact that all of the changes that these casters have been getting to try and help them out a bit really hasn't been big enough. But it's only phase 1. In phase 2, it could be completely different. Who knows? We could see all the casters absolutely pumping and all of the physical damage dealers fall down a little bit, because a lot of these classes do come online with their big talents by level 40. I've got to be honest, I don't actually see that happening. I still think we're going to see warriors and rogues and hunters dominating for pretty much the whole of Season of Discovery, but I do sit here hoping to be proved wrong. And that's the news this week that you might have missed. If you enjoyed the video, as always, be sure to like and subscribe. Consider joining the channel as a member, and I'll see you on the next one.